Welcome back to the 62 steps in creating and crafting the Signature Series pen. We'll be discussing steps 35 and 36, which is about protecting the surface of the pen now that it has had an walnut oil soak and penetration into the wood, the cells of the wood itself, and is dried for 24 hours. The next step is to take and protect that walnut oil that's soaked into the wood. Now, unfortunately, I've lost or didn't record these steps, these processes on the 62-step pen itself. So I'm bringing in an exotic hardwood that I'm working on here, which is a East Indian rosewood. It's a Dalbergia latifolia is a scientific name. And so what I'm doing now is just giving a final sanding and verifying and checking if there's any scratch marks that are lateral to the pen from previous workings, and checking it very carefully, both in terms of sight as well as touch. I find that by taking my fingers, I can sometimes detect things that aren't even visible to me. And looking at it, it's just a gorgeous wood to be working with. This next stage of protecting is to put a barrier over the oil that has now been solidified and set up in the interior of the wood cells, and moving now to a what you're seeing there is 75% shellac with 0 wax. It's been de-waxed completely. It starts off being a 2-pound sealer, S-E-A-L-E-R. It's a sealer coat that's used for sealing woods, and it's I put in 25% additional denatured alcohol, so it's really about 1.5 pounds cut, which means it's 1.5 pounds of shellac flakes that's been de-waxed into 1 gallon of denatured alcohol. Okay. It comes as a 2-pound cut. I cut it down a little bit further, so I found that it's a nice combination rather than a 50-50 or a 1-pound cut to use a 1.5 pound cut. And now what I'm doing after putting that on, and you can see how fast that it actually dries, at least on the surface. And I'm more spreading the sawdust from a 400 grit strip there that I'm using, and doing more distribution of the sawdust than I am actually sanding with the 400 at that stage. I'm now bringing in a 600 grit or a P600 grit sandpaper, and at this stage it is mostly dried, particularly on the outside, so I'm sanding off and further refining the surface, bringing in the shop rag there, shop towel with the 1.5 pound cut shellac, reasserting the slurry, bringing in the sawdust again now from the 600 grit. So it's a combination of a protection coat and a continuation of the pore filling process that I go through to bring the surface of the pen to a highly smooth surface to work with for the upcoming polishing stage, and the application of the customization of decals on this. Once I've done the redistribution of the sawdust from the 600 grit, then wiping it down, and I'm going to fast forward now to after I put in the grip that you'll see at the end of the pen there, bringing the 1.5 pound shellac back to do another protective coat. And I might do this, in some cases I might do this once, some case different kinds of exotic hardwoods I might use it 2 or 3 times. It really depends on the nature of the wood, the porosity of the wood, the surface of the wood. In this case, I think this is probably the 3rd time that I'm going to be providing that protective coat. Lathe is operating here at probably a 600 RPM, maybe 800 RPM. I don't have it all the way up because I don't want it splashing all around. The shellac at this stage is pretty thin, so going through a final both distribution of sawdust at the 600 grit level. I actually have my thumb on top there to check to make sure that I'm not building up any ridges from wet shellac underneath. I'm pressing the sandpaper strip with my bottom finger in that past scene, and then my thumb on the top to distribute it. And yet another final protective shellac. 1.5 pound cut. Confirming the evenness of the distribution of the sawdust and the shellac at this stage. And the final bit here is on this particular pen. I have a engraved grip with a special chisel. And so after the pore filling, which also fills in the lines of the grip, I'm going to come back and just kind of clean those up and be done with the protection stage. So thank you for coming, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of the 62 step pen.